Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Mazdakism became successful. Mazdak is not really that known in the Western world. I must say that until recently, even me too, I didn't know who this guy was. Well, let me tell you who Mazdak was. Mazdak, he was a Zoroastrian priest, and until nowadays, he's seen as one of the most influential priests of Zoroastrianism. Mazdak can also be seen as a Sassanid reformer, prophet, and thus religious reformer who had a lot of influence. The goal of Mazdakism was to go back to the roots of Zoroastrianism and have a reformed and more purified version of it. Many people argue that Mazdakism has some influence of Manichaeism and also could be regarded as some type of proto-socialism. Well, I leave it up to you. Mazdak, however, was not the founder of this school of thought, or of Mazdakism itself, but it was someone else. Zaradusht e Kuragan, or also known as Mazdak the Elder or Zaradusht, he taught everyone about altruism and hedonism. His followers should eat and drink good, aim for good deeds, practice hospitality, and not shed any blood at all. Conflict should also be avoided, the same as harm. Later, more conservative Zoroastrians criticized Mazdakism as heresy, and according to them, well, women, they were shared between the followers of Mazdakism, but due to the fact that, there is a lack of proper sources about it, I would say that this might be just an invention to discredit people who just had different opinion about the same religion. Mazdakism had also a dualistic cosmology and a worldview, which was, however, much more optimistic than Manichaeism. This ideology thought that there were two original principles of the universe: light, the good one, and darkness, the evil one. Light is characterized by knowledge and feeling and acts by design and free will, whereas darkness is ignorant and blind and acts at random. Mankind's role in this life was, through good conduct, to release the parts of himself that belong to the light. God was believed to rule the world through letters, which held the key to the great secret that should be learned by everyone. Two distinguishing factors of Mazdak's teaching were the reduction of the importance of religious formalities, the true religious person being the one who understood and related correctly to the principles of the universe, and a criticism of the strong position of mainstream clergy, who he believed had oppressed the Persian population and caused much poverty. Mazdakism also emphasized on good conduct, no killing, vegetarianism, being kind and friendly, and living in peace with other people. Polygamy was criticized not because Mazdakism supported women's rights, but because many poor people, they lacked the option to get wives. The biggest and most known supporter of Mazdakism was King Kawat. He managed to convert the Kinda as well to Mazdakism. Kinda was a big Arabic tribal federation, and due to the fear of the nobility, King Kawat was deposed, but he came back with the help of the Hephthalites, but his ideas, they changed. From there on, it went downhill for the followers of Mazdak. They were persecuted, killed, and many campaigns were made against them, campaigns similar, well, as the Crusades. But what if all of that changed? What if Mazdakism became successful? Let's say in this alternate timeline, King Kawat was able to manipulate the nobility and take the ones out that were his opponents, be it through murder, false accusations, or he would have found out that they conspired against him, and thus he could, take precautions. He would replace certain key positions with followers of Mazdakism and slowly but surely gain again control in his empire. What happens next? Well, there are a few options. The pacifism preached by Mazdak could not really be enabled, and it is possible that Kavak would have a much stronger position so that he could take the Hephthalites out, or at least give them a heavy blow, so that they would not become such a huge threat, and thus we would have bigger changes in this timeline. Sassanid foreign policy focused also heavily in Arabia, and they used Arabia as some sort of proxy war territory where their allies they fought against the Byzantine allies. With the Hephthalites being paralyzed, Kavak would surely also spread Mazdakism in Arabia, giving it a much bigger foothold in there and changing much of Arabic history. He would try to make reforms a bit earlier, given the fact that his reign was not interrupted, and that he needed to crush also the power of the nobility and the clergy. All in all, he would package it as a reform for the people, and that he was the king of the peoples. This would certainly boost his popularity among the poorer classes, and in OTL, granaries, for instance, were built. Well, perhaps after some time, not only would they build granaries in there in the Sassanid Empire, but more things from which the local population could take advantage from. I think that the Incan Empire would serve as a very good role model for such a very similar system that could have been put in place through Mazdakism. Tax reforms would also be made, but with the lack of paper it would be very difficult to make a very substantial and long-enduring reform, thus smaller reforms would persist for some years. I believe that in 520 the adoption of Khosrow could happen. Because the rival brothers of the current king were still a force to reckon with, and seeing Kavak more successful in this OTL, the Byzantines might respect him more and adopt his son as a Roman, but with no claims over the empire, of course. This means that the focus of interest would after 520 not be in the West or Arabia, but probably again where the Hephthalites were, and without the true front war, the Sassanids they could beat the Hephthalites with ease. Due to the good relationship with Byzantium, papyrus could also be important, and a more complex tax system could thus be written down and be established. While Byzantium established the Codex Justinianus, a collection of laws and legal interpretation, something similar could happen within the Sassanid Empire, but with regard to the tax system. The tax system could become more fair. With more papyrus, we would eventually also have a bigger bureaucracy and new career options for more people. With peace between Byzantium and the Sassanid Empire and no other threat for some time, Mazdakist pacifism could kick off and trade would flourish, while at the same time some taxes, be it in money or goods, had to be given to the Sassanid Empire, which they would likely use for the infrastructure projects that they had, and also for redistribution, of course, to keep the population calm. The population could also increase as polygamy would be discouraged or even banned after some time, and thus more men had a chance in finding wives because, well, in these times, if you were a single woman and after a certain year, you didn't really have a good life. We would have something like a Pax Romana, only that it would be a Pax Persica. Byzantium would face other opponents in the west, mostly barbarians who settled in the former Roman territories, while the Sassanids would focus on their own kingdom. Pacifism would become, of course, a defensive pacifism, because if they were attacked, they would try to defend themselves and beat the enemy, of course, and just try to crush them. Mazdakism would perhaps not become a religious movement, and certainly also not lead to socialism or worse communism, but we would get a new model of a welfare state. Mazdakism could very well establish itself in Arabia, but be in concurrence with old Arabic tribal laws, which were a major influence for Islam. With the Sassanids backing Mazdakism, Islam might not exist, and if Muhammad or someone like him would appear, or even an Ali figure, his energy might be invested into reforming Mazdakism or adopting it to the Arabic needs. Byzantium would certainly not like Mazdakism, but as they were too busy with many numerous wars, they would mostly try to suppress somehow Mazdakist influence, but without success. Christianity could change, in my opinion, a lot. Perhaps the fundamentals of Christianity would stay stronger, and we would also see this divide between believers and rich priests, for instance. And there was also this very interesting movement in Armenia, which I think, in my opinion, had a lot of influence from Mazdakism. And if we also check Bogomilism and also Qatarism, or the Qatarians, they also had a very huge amount, I think, of Mazdakist influence. And as a result, Christianity would change a lot, but I'm not able to predict how it would change in this timeline. Will the Sassanids and the Byzantines continue to exist peacefully? Yes and no. Probably at one point someone would attack the other, but without a third party such as the Arabic Islamic invasion and also the Hephthalites, nobody around the Byzantines and the Sassanids could disrupt this order. Or perhaps some type of Cold War could emerge, but by sponsoring certain religious groups or factions, causing civil wars perhaps at most. Certainly more philosophies and religious ideologies could pop up and spread throughout the world and the West as well, as the East would stay better connected, while at the same time Byzantium and the Sassanids could stay both a powerhouse. Here are two different endings which I propose for such a scenario. Number one, the Mongols might even be butterflied away due to the changes in Central Asia, and thus probably some tribes that had an influence over the Mongols. With that in mind, Song China could perhaps industrialize in some weird way, and we might have a more advanced society, at least in the type of governance. Because in this OTL, for instance, we would have the spread of the Codex Justinianus, which would become a prime example for laws. The Sassanid tax system too, which would be an inspiration for many other states. Perhaps even the type of welfare system. And I believe that if Song China would industrialize, they would also probably try to look at their neighbors or powers around them, and when they would see how the Sassanids, they were able to control the population in some way with a welfare program, they would probably try to do something similar, because as we know, with industrialization there comes also these massive changes in the cities, where you have more people or also more extreme poverty and extreme richness. So the Song Chinese, they could probably use this system of Mazdakism as an influence to change their society for good, if they would care for the population, that is. Number two. But if the Mongols would still exist and rampage across the world, the biggest loser would be the Sassanids, because, well, the Sassanids, they were so close to them, and they would just not be able to compete with this type of warfare. While the Byzantines, they would also face the Mongols and also have some losses, but then later on, once the Mongols, they split, they would clean up in the Middle East. With the bloodthirst of the Mongols, the successor states of the Sassanid Empire could follow even more so Mazdakism, but perhaps after some time drop the pacifist part and more intervention for a good cause would be seen, while Byzantium would get more and more nervous seeing what would be going on in their alternate backyards. And that's where we leave it for now.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.